for joining us on another episode of Adaptive Adjustments. I'm your host, Antonica, mental health professional, certified mediator, and founder of the youth empowerment organization, Children in Action. For today's episode, guys, we're going to be touching on autism. But before we get into that, I just want to wish all the children out there a happy International Children's Day. And I want to place specific emphasis on my organization, which is called Children in Action, a youth empowerment organization, which was founded in July of 2016. So guys, Children in Action is a non-profit organization. As I said, it was founded in the year 2016. They focus on the empowerment of children through the use of their talents, community outreach programs, academic after-school programs, theater productions, adolescent developmental workshops, mental health workshops, parent-child programs, counseling therapy initiatives, referrals to suitable government and non-governmental organizations, as well as mental health infomercials and many more. So guys, for today, I have two of my children by the name of Soraya and Ariana, and they had a presentation that they came up with. They invented a project which focuses on International Children's Day and the theme this year, which is a better future for every child. So, with further ado, I'm going to introduce to you Ariana and Soraya, ages 8 and 5, with their presentation for today's commemoration of International Children's Day.
Good morning. The idea of this project comes from this year's theme, Children Before Everything. It sends a great message to all ears. This Good morning. The idea of this project comes from this year's theme, Children Before Everything. It sends a great message to all ears. This project is about the educational system of schools. Since COVID-19, we haven't been to physical school, and online schooling is not the same. We need to get back our life in the classroom so we could interact with our peers physically. Our project is about going to school as we know it. Girls and boys are dressed in their uniform to attend class as we know it. The teacher is by the door welcoming her students. The teacher already planned her lessons for the day. We can't wait to go back to school. Happy International Children's Day. We hope you like our project. Bye.
Yes, guys, so that was Ariana and Soraya, hailing all the way from St. James with their project, which focused on children being the future, and their message was simply that they want to go back to school because they believe that education holds the key to their future. So, as we move forward, guys, we're going to be introducing our guest for today's show, Dr. Radica Mahase, the founder of Autism TT, supporting Autism TT, right? So she's on set with us via Zoom link. Hi, Dr. Radica. Thank you for joining us on our show.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Lovely, lovely. So today, I just wanted to tell the audience a bit about yourself, right? Explain who you are, what you do, how has it been for you, and then we're going to jump right into autism, what it is, and how we manage it as parents.
Okay, so that's an easy one. I'm a historian by profession. I am a senior lecturer in history at COSTAT. I am the founder and director of the NGO Support Autism TNT. I started this NGO 6 years ago because I have a nephew who is on the autism spectrum. And in the whole process of trying to get help for him, to get him diagnosed and to access school and therapy and so on, I realized how difficult it was, all the challenges that parents and caregivers are faced with. So I started this NGO to create equal access to opportunities for persons on the autism spectrum. It is a purely voluntary NGO. So I focus on youth volunteerism. So presently we have 350 youth volunteers who make up what we refer to as the Youth Arm of Support Autism TNT. That is the Siblings and Friends Network. I write a weekly column in the Newsday newspaper. It's published on a Monday on autism and disabilities in general. And I am the author of a book called Autism in Trinidad and Tobago, a collection of articles. That's about it.
Wow, you hold a lot of belts. That's awesome. It's really nice to see that someone is so passionate about something, you know, and there are a lot of persons out there that, you know, they want the knowledge about autism, but they don't have the avenue. So can you just give us a number to call in the event that someone would want to call you and contact you to find out some more about autism?
Sure. So they can reach the NGO at 791-1320. That is 791-1320. They could also email us at ttautismnetwork@gmail.com, or they could contact us via any of our social media handles, Instagram or Facebook.
Okay, lovely. Okay, so Dr. Radica, thank you again for joining us. With all of your qualifications, it's amazing to have such a person on board with us today at Adaptive Adjustments. Can you tell the listening audience a bit about autism? What it is and...
So to put it simply, and basic things for you to understand is that it is autism spectrum disorder is characterized by delays in speech development, issues in social interaction, and various repetitive behavior. It is on a spectrum. It is a spectrum, which means that no two individuals diagnosed with autism display the same traits. So, for example, one child might not communicate verbally, while another child might speak just as well as children his or her age. One child might have difficulties in social situations and would not interact with other children, whereas another child might have absolutely no problems with social interaction. So that's what we mean that it's a spectrum. And when we say every child is unique, when we think about autism, every child is really unique because they will display different levels or different degrees of the three main characteristics that I mentioned.
Okay. Okay, so at what age can parents look out for signs of autism in their child? At what age?
You can pick up on the signs or what we refer to as red flags. So there are certain stages in a child's development that you expect a child to reach, and you parents and caregivers can notice those from as early as 1 year. What would they be looking at? For example, children might not respond to their name by 12 months, which is 1 year. Okay. They might not point at objects to show that they're interested in it. Mm-hmm. They might not want to play with other children. They might not make eye contact. They might want to be alone by themselves. So between ages 12 to, let's say, 3 years, you should be able to recognize the signs. Some parents, when they are not aware of what to look for, they wouldn't pick up on that. And I keep saying that we have this thing in Trinidad where we say, well, especially with boys, children, well, the boy taking longer to develop because boys generally take longer, don't expect them to speak now, things like that. But all those are red flags. Delayed speech, they'll start saying sentences much later than they're supposed to. They might repeat words over and over. They might not want you to hug them or touch them because of sensory issues. They might get upset with any little changes. Like, for example, I remember when my nephew was a toddler, he used to drink his bottle then, and he absolutely refused to drink when we had to change the nipple on the bottle. Okay. So, things like that you can pick up on from very early. And the earlier you recognize the sign, the earlier you can get help for the child. So it's very important that parents and caregivers recognize these signs very early.
Wow. It's quite complex. I know that there are a number of different spectrums, different disorders that are now classified as autism. Can you just enlighten us as to the names of these disorders?
Yes. So autism spectrum disorder is an umbrella term that is used for a wide range of neurodevelopmental disorders.
Okay.
And it includes things like Asperger's syndrome, Rett syndrome, childhood disintegrative disorder, Kanner syndrome, and pervasive development disorder. And each of these will have various challenges with speech and language communication, social interaction, behavior, and sensory issues. So for all of those that I just listed, it's more or less the same kind of challenges we see, but we'll see it to different extent, different ways it's manifested in the child. But they all comprise that wide spectrum called autism spectrum disorder.
Okay. And how does a child with autism grow into it? What are some of the changes that parents would want to look for as the child matures, into adulthood?
So parents need to focus on those the three main ones: communication,
right.
Verbal communication, or any kind of speech delay. So you would know that, okay, a child by 2 years or 3 years would be saying 2 words, so 3-word sentences. That is a red flag. They have not achieved that milestone. Mm-hmm. The other one is social interaction. Again, you expect a child at 3 years or 4 years to be able to interact with other children, to play with them, and so on. So that is another red flag. And the repetitive behavior is a major red flag. So a lot of children might rock back and forth. They might flap their hands. They might play with the same toy or the same part of a toy over and over. Things like those are major things that parents can spot in children once they know what to look out for and what those delays mean.
Okay. Does it worsen with their age? So like a child that would be 5 years old displaying these signs and symptoms as they mature, as they go into secondary school or things like that, does it worsen with their age?
First thing I must tell you is that autism is a lifelong disorder. So it doesn't go away, but children can be taught, they can get help to manage it. So it all depends again on the individual child. Some children might start communicating verbally at a later age, so that by the time they reach, let's say, teenage years, they have started communicating, especially if they got assistance with speech therapy, for example.
Right.
Some children might not. So it all depends. I wouldn't say it worsens. I would say that it depends on the help that the child gets that will help in stimulating brain development.
Okay. One of the myths of autism, when you hear about autism, you hear that children are often unable to focus on many different things at the same time. However, they may place specific emphasis on one thing and they may be really great at that. Can you just shed some light on it for us? Because, I've never really dealt one-on-one with an autistic child, but I know of some autistic children that are quite talented.
Oh, definitely. We find that many of the autistic children, they're very good at art and they might be very good at music. Whereas there are others who do not like noise, or they have sensory issues when it comes to noise and they cannot hear any musical instrument. Okay. So I can't stress how much it really is the individual child, how much it depends on the individual person. So you might have some children who, they will be able to pick up things that you teach them right away. Then there are others who might take a longer time, and you'll need to find very creative ways to teach them. It's not that they can't learn it. It's just that you need to find other ways to teach them.
Yes.
And then you might have those who they may not be able to communicate with you verbally, but yet you can understand everything that they are trying to tell you from their gestures and body language and so on. And again, I always use my nephew as a reference for that. He's now 17 years old. He doesn't communicate verbally, but we know every single thing that he's trying to tell us. If he lifts his hand, we know exactly what it means. So with children on the spectrum, it all depends on how the individual child develops over time as they get older.
Okay. I remember, as you said that, I go back to my student days as a student nurse, and we had a rotation at the Wharton Patrick School, and there they have autistic children. And some of them were really, as you say, really artistic, yet they weren't able, as you rightly said, to communicate with us verbally, but they were able to literally help us to understand exactly what they were trying to say. So as you said that, it just, awakened that memory of when I was a student nurse, and we had that rotation at the Wharton Patrick School in St. Anne's. But some of them are really talented, as I would have observed by going through your site as well. Some of the children are very artistic. And, when you look at certain movies with children that have autism, you see that they are able to communicate. Some of them are, in fact, able to communicate with society, but in their own way. Like their method of thinking is slightly different from a normal person. And how does that affect, from your real life experience with your nephew, how does that affect the runnings of your home?
And we are so accustomed to him. I mean, he will communicate with myself or his sister. Sometimes he would say sentences. Sometimes he might answer you in one word or two words. But whether or not he speaks to us verbally, he says something verbally, we understand, exactly what he wants and what he is trying to say. The only time that we might have a big challenge is if he's not feeling well, because then it's very difficult for him to tell us what is hurting. So then we will come up with ways to communicate with him. So his sister, who is just a year older than him and one of his biggest advocates, would show him some pictures and say, well, point to what is hurting. Is it your tummy? Is it your ear? Is it your mouth? Things like that. So children on the spectrum tend to be very visually oriented. That's why when you mention the art and how good they are with art and craft and so on, they tend to be very visually oriented. So parents can find ways to communicate with them through pictures, through cue cards, things like that. And there are so many different apps that you can use on tablets and iPads as well to help them communicate with you. So with my nephew, we understand him. The only time, as I say, the challenge might come up is if he's not well, if something is hurting. But otherwise, we have absolutely no problem understanding what he wants. And he will also tell us outright if we would, like, let's go for a drive, he will say no. So we know exactly what it is. And the thing is, when you interact with a child on the spectrum, the more you interact with that child, the more it becomes, so easy to understand what they are trying to tell you in their own way, in their own method of communication. And most of the parents and caregivers who have non-verbal children will tell you that the minute my child raises his hand, I know what he wants. So it's not a problem in our household per se. And a lot of other parents will tell you the same thing.
Lovely, lovely. One of the questions that I have been asking myself, how do autistic persons respond to emotions? How do they respond to their emotions? How do they respond to love? I know that they are able to feel the love, especially based on what you just said. But how do they respond to that?
I'm glad you brought that up, because there's one of the myths of autism is that children with autism don't feel emotions.
Yeah.
That is so not true. Any parent or caregiver will tell you that their child is so loving. They love to hug. They will always be kissing you. They're very sensitive to your feelings. So many of the parents and caregivers would say, even on days when they're not well or they're upset, they will hide it from their child because they pick up on it and they know that something is wrong and they feel upset as well. They are very, very sensitive, caring children. And I really wish that more people will recognize that.
So what are some of the tips that you would give to parents or caretakers to show more love to these children, to engage that feeling of emotions within them?
To be honest with you, I don't think the parents need to get those tips, because what we find from interacting with parents within Support Autism TNT, we have a parent support network. And what we find from interacting with our parents is that they will do anything to make sure that their child, okay, they're well taken care of, they're sensitive to what their child needs or what their child wants at a particular time. So when it comes to loving their child, autism parents will tell you that they love their children unconditionally.
Okay.
So I don't think it's a matter of educating the parents or, tips to the parents. I think it's more tips for society, because society still have all these misconceptions and they believe that, these children will never be able to have a fulfilling life, or they can't show emotions, or they're violent and so on. So it's more for society to recognize it. Parents and caregivers recognize it, and they would tell you that child is the most loving child that they have.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. It's really ironic, but it's awesome. So what are some of the treatments that parents or caretakers or persons suspecting that their child is autistic can reach out to? What are some of the treatment methods?
So, as I said before, autism is a lifelong condition, but we can help persons on the spectrum to manage different aspects of, their challenges, whether it's speech or so on. And the main thing is for them to access therapy and educational opportunities. When we're talking about therapies, we're talking about things like speech therapy, occupational therapy, behavioral therapy. Those are the main ones that will really help them, to be able to function in in a less challenging way. So therapy is very important. The second thing is they need to be able to access an education. And unfortunately, that is one of the biggest challenges facing parents and caregivers in our country, because so many of them are not at the level where they can attend a regular school. And then the ones who can't attend a regular school, is very difficult to get them enrolled in schools. Many of our parents have been told outright by teachers and principals that I can't take your child because we don't have special education teachers in the school, or we don't have the resources to deal with a child. We have many situations as well where children have been enrolled in school, and after a few years they were forced to stop because teachers are unwilling to teach them. All kind of issues. So the most important one is to be able to access therapy, and access therapy free of charge, because right now therapy is only accessible within the private system, and it is very expensive. It ranges anywhere from $250 to $450 a session, and a session could be anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes. And the recommended amount of therapy for a child on the spectrum is 15 hours. Most parents can't afford 1 hour, much less 15 hours a week. Okay, so that's the first thing. And the second one is, of course, the schools. We need to have a more inclusive education system where those who are able to function in a normal school setting could be able to attend those schools, and at the same time get the specialized or the individualized attention that they need. So those are the kind of things that we need in Trinidad, for them to really be given the opportunity to develop intellectually, physically, emotionally, and to be able to lead very fulfilling lives in our country.
Well said, well said. Have you all taken any measures to reach out to government agencies regarding policy briefs and so on to get institutions started for these autistic children?
Yeah, so I mentioned in the beginning that one of the main reasons I started Support Autism in TNT was to create opportunities for persons on the spectrum. But one of the other major areas that we have been involved in is advocacy. And yes. On one hand, we have our youth volunteers who have been trying to influence, society, let me put it that way, and get rid of some of that stigma that we have in society. On the other hand, I have been trying to reach out through the newspaper column, which has been doing wonderful, because so many people would read the articles and they will call for more information, or they will call and say, well, I think my child is on the spectrum and seeing this, what do I do? And on the third level is reaching out to government bodies, ministries, and working with them. So far, we haven't seen any kind. We have basically developed good relations with, for example, the Ministry of Social, and we have worked with different bodies at different levels, but we are still yet to see effective policies being implemented. We have policies. It's not that we don't have national policies. It's just that they are not effectively implemented. And until that happens, children on the spectrum will continue to be at a disadvantage in Trinidad and Tobago.
Wow, that's some deep stuff. I mean, I'm sorry that it has to affect you guys in that way, and I do hope that the government agencies put things in place to accommodate these children, because they need it. And there are so many children being affected by autism in our country to date that it's really imperative that the government take a stand and they actually put legislations in place and put actual policies in place to ensure that institutions be erected to accommodate these children. So yes, Dr. Radica, as we come back to you, wow, that was a mouthful there. That was a lot. Institutions, no institutions for the children. The ones that do exist. Can you just give the listening public an idea of how many institutions we have at present and where they can find them?
Institutions in terms of what?
Schooling. Like schooling for the children. Because I know you said that there are limited schools. So can you just mention one or two of them?
Okay, so when we're talking about education, we're talking about three types of school. We're talking about irregular government schools,
right?
Which, as I said, once a child is capable of attending a regular government school, they should be placed in the system and integrated with the rest of the school population. That is the ideal situation. We do have an inclusive education policy, but it is not effectively implemented. We are not sure which of the schools. There was a pilot project in place 2 years ago to start off that inclusive education policy and make sure that, some schools would be used as a pilot for it, but the Ministry of Education never made it public what those schools are, so we're not sure about that.
Okay.
And within the normal public school, the ideal thing would be for students to get children on the spectrum to get access to therapy within that school system and to have what we refer to as an individual education plan, an IEP with a special education teacher. Our curriculum does not allow for an IEP because at the end of the day, students are writing the same exams.
Yes.
The special education teachers, we do have a degree in special needs education at UTT. Those students have been graduating every year, and those who have graduated as far as 5 years ago are still waiting to get jobs to be placed in schools. Okay. So when it comes to public education, we see where that is not working as it should. The second one is the government special schools. So schools like Lady Ochoy Home, St. Peter's Government School, things like that, Point-of-Care Special Schools. We do have those. The issue with those is that, one, they don't have enough resources to take the amount of children who needs to be enrolled in a school. And the second thing is children of all different disabilities are lumped together. Yes. So there's no special program for children on the spectrum or children with cerebral palsy and so on. So that itself has a lot of complications. And the third one is a private special needs schools. In the last 5 years or so, we have seen an increase in the number of private special needs schools throughout Trinidad. They are cropping up all over because autism is more or less a business now. Those are very expensive, so they are accessible to parents, parents from upper class who can afford it, maybe even the middle class. But the parents from low income background, they cannot afford to pay it. It ranges anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 a month. Okay, so it is very, very difficult for many parents to access that. And with COVID, I keep saying that COVID have brought some new things that are positive as well. One of them is the whole idea of online school. Now, many of the children with autism, they are not able to sit in front of a computer and do online school. But parents and caregivers have resorted to hiring tutors to work with them. And they have started, there are a lot of them who are now turning to homeschooling. And that is one of the options that, parents and caregivers tend to lean towards, because in that case, their child can work at their own pace. They can get the individual attention that they need. But again, you have to be able to afford a tutor to work with your child. So that's the situation with education.
Okay, thank you so much for that information. Okay, so I heard you mention COVID-19, which brings me to one of the points that I want to explore with you. How does COVID-19 affect the home of an autistic person? I know you mentioned the online schooling, hiring tutors, but for the normal person living in a home with a child that is affected by the spectrum, how has that been? It's been 2 years now, so how has it been?
It started off very rough for most of the children who are accustomed to attending schools and those who are getting therapy, because it meant that they had a routine. You know, they would have a routine of getting up in the morning, getting ready for school and so on. They had a routine, even if they were not in school and they would go for therapy 1 or 2 times a week, there was a routine. But then COVID changed that whole routine. Because since March 2020, when we went into lockdown, when we implemented lockdown measures, they now had to completely stop what they were doing. You know, they were now home. They couldn't go out and get therapy anymore. And what we find is many of the children have regressed. So a lot of the progress that they had made in terms of both not academic, intellectual and emotional development, we see where they have regressed. So it's a big concern for many parents. It has been very stressful for many parents because whereas, you know, before parents might have gotten let's say a 2 or 3 hour break when the child is in school, now they don't have that. They're with this special needs child 24/7. And it can be very, very stressful, especially as children struggle to deal with the change in their routine. And we see many cases where more of them were getting meltdowns and so on. So it has been a very stressful experience for many parents.
Wow.
For those parents who were always accustomed to having their children home because they were not in a school, then, you know, nothing have really changed in terms of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so how can parents or caretakers now adapt to having their child at home? I know you said that there would have been meltdowns, right? Have they seeked like counseling or therapy as a result of that?
Again, there's not really any free access to counseling for parents, so it's very difficult. What we advise parents to do within our parent support network, we let them share their ideas. So if, you know, one particular parent is having a child who's having an extremely difficult time and the meltdowns are very frequent, or the parents might suggest things that they can do, they will share their ideas. They will also share ideas on the activities that parents can do with their children while they're at home. So, you know, things like craft activities, even if sitting down with them for 20-30 minutes to do something that they might enjoy, you know, just to distract them, just to give them that opportunity to still take part in something. So basically we encourage parents to come up with different things to do with their child. The youth volunteers at Support Autism TNT did an entire virtual education series with short stories where they read bedtime stories. They did craft activities for parents to follow. So they started from the material you needed to the completion of that craft, and it was very easy for parents to follow it and do it with their children just to keep them busy and to keep them active. We also encourage parents to try to create a new routine. You know, especially for those children who are going out to school, we don't want them to be so totally lost that when school is reopened at some point, they cannot adapt again. So create a routine where you get up in the morning and you tell them that, okay, we have a craft for half an hour at 10 o'clock, or we will go for a walk at 5 o'clock. You know, little things like that will still keep them involved and they'll still have them intellectually engaged in some way possible. Just to provide a structure in their lives. So those are the kind of things that the parents have been trying. And again, I really am in awe of parents, you know, and the ways that they adapt to suit the changes and to help their child through all these different times, you know, whether it's getting adjusted to not going to school or the lack of therapy. It's just amazing at the things that parents do to try to help their children with little or no assistance.
I must commend them for that, for the effort that they make, because just having to deal with an autistic child would be a lot, and then having to deal with them with the absence of school and the absence of therapy, I think that weighs a lot on the parent's shoulder. Right? Adaptive adjustments, when we started, we had an infomercial series, videos, where we spoke about different topics inclusive of parental burnout. So what I'll do, I'll be sure to share the link with you for our YouTube channel so that you can also share the link with the parents. So there might be some tips there for them that may be useful as well. It's not specific to autism or autistic persons, but they may be able, because I heard you mention schedules and different things
Yes.
like that, and routines within the home. So there was a system put in place similarly with our infomercial. So I'll be sure to share the link with you after the episode so that you can pass it on to the parents.
Thank you. I'm sure parents will appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Right, so Dr. Radica, I want to thank you. I mean, let's just do a quick recap for the parents that are listening right now. Autism, it entails a spectrum of disorders that come together. The children, you can look for symptoms from the age 2 onwards. Parents, they find that as the child matures, they need to show the children love and acceptance, and the children are very receptive of it, and they too show love and affection, right? Also, it's not that children with autism cannot communicate. Some of them are unable to as best as they can, but they are still able to help the parents to understand where they're coming from and what they need in the times of adversity. So parents, you need to show your children love. Even though you have a child or you suspect that your child is autistic, you need to reach out to Supporting Autism TT. There are other sites available on Facebook that you can reach out to, on the internet as well. You can call the number, right? So this is Support Autism TT. Their number to call would be 791-1320. That is 791-1320. If you have any questions or any persons that you may suspect that is suffering from this spectrum, right? As Dr. Mahase said, there are limited resources available, and she's reaching out to the relevant authorities to get things in place to accommodate these students, accommodate these children, because they too deserve a fair chance at learning and at reaching their true potential. Yeah? Is there anything that you would like to add to what I just said? Anything that you would like to tell the parents, the listeners, anything at all regarding this topic?
I think you did an excellent summary. I just want to say to parents out there, at the end of the day, as parents, as caregivers, you love your child unconditionally, and just keep doing it. That is what will give you the strength to go through every single day and to face all the challenges that may come up. And I want to say thank you to you for using your platform to, to educate and to inform the people out there about autism.
Thank you. No problem. No problem. Absolutely no problem. So you can feel free to reach out. I know that you guys do a lot of volunteering. If ever I have the time, I can also use, because I'm the founder of Children's in Action Youth Empowerment Organization. So probably we can work on something where we can have the children come in and volunteer on a forum. Let's say that all this COVID-19 restrictions, regulations thing die down. We can have something interactive with the children, because my children, they too love art and craft. They love to be artistic. They love to express themselves, and they're good at drama as well. So probably we can do something where we can, entertain your children, and they can all, associate with each other on a platform that would be safe for them both. Yeah.
We will definitely hold you to that.
Of course, I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it. Right, so I want to thank you for being a guest on our show today. Thank you, Dr. Radica Mahase, for taking the time off from your busy schedule to, inform the general public, inform the nation as to what's happening on your side of the fence with autistic children and your family as well. I wish you all the best in moving forward. Right, keep doing what you're doing with your nephew. Keep encouraging those parents and those young volunteers to be, reaching out to the persons that would be in need. Yeah, so thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. So that was Dr. Radica Mahase, founder of Supporting Autism TT. She is doing a wonderful job out there with the autistic children of our nation, right? And she's also collaborating with other non-governmental agencies to ensure that children with autism has a voice and that they have avenues for their sustainable development. So guys, I think it's about that time for us now on Adaptive Adjustments. But just before we go, I have to give a special shout out to Bling Dong Apparel. These guys are the sponsors of my wonderful blue dress this evening. So Bling Dong Apparel, founder of Bling Dong Apparel, Miss Danielle Manette, I want to thank you for partnering with us, right? And I do hope that God continues to bless your business, right, guys? So this was our episode for today, autism, managing autism, living with autism, especially in a time like this, and the different symptoms, treatment methods, and indicators that you parents need to look for in your child if you suspect that your child is autistic. I'm your host, guys, Auntie Nika. See you on our next episode.